This is the Friday, April 22nd, 2016 version of the Market Plus segment. Joining us now is Dan Hueber. Dan, welcome back.
Thanks very much. Great to be here.
Well, and we're excited to have you. We've got a question here from Phil in Ontario, Canada. And Phil is asking a question that has been on the minds of so many folks in the ag industry this past week. He wants to know, are ag commodities back? Are they back in flavor? Are they back in style?
They're at least liked a little bit better. I don't know if they're totally in favor, but it's, and actually I had written a column on this earlier this week, and, I think that has been one of the overlooked factors really since January 1, or almost January 1, as if you look back at that time, there was a number of articles, well-written pieces by people like Mohammed El-Arian, who used to be with PIMCO, saying, when you really look at investment money around the globe, it's always looking for value. And here, they had a terrible year last year in the stock equity markets, no yield in the bonds. Where do we place that money? And I think they were really pointing out at that time that if there's anything that's undervalued, it is the commodity sector. So it isn't just specifically ag commodities. I think it is commodities as a whole. It's crude oil, it's industrial metals. It is the ag sector, and I think that's actually been a contributing factor on this rally. Kind of a silent but very consistent contributing factor, and I think they're here to stay. I mean, they don't just come in and kind of whipsaw themselves around. I mean, they tend to get in there, and they're committing more money back to it. I think I had read earlier this week that J.P. Morgan, which saw outflows, years of outflows in commodity investment last year around 10 to 12%, has seen an inflow of around 15% this year. So, I mean, the money has come back pretty steadily.
15% of dollars invested in commodities, they've increased it 15%?
Right. Increased 50. Granted, it's starting from a reduced level, so maybe not quite as impressive as starting from a higher level, but regardless, that shift seems to have happened. And like I say, I don't think they do that just for 1 or 2 months. They're going to be in there for the longer haul as well.
And they're long commodities.
Exactly. I mean, that type of investment.
Because it's not helpful at all if they come in 15% short.
And that type of money really are long-only investors. Okay. I mean, they're looking at, I have a portfolio, and maybe I want to have, instead of having 5% in commodities, I want to increase that to 15% in commodities, which will be on the long side. So it just provides that extra little buy power and boost it to the marketplace.
You bet. And so far in this rally, grains are kind of on the tail end. You mentioned industrial metals have kind of been the spur. Is that Chinese growth moving the industrial metals?
I think the Chinese buying in China, there's been a lot of money pouring back into commodities, primarily into that. But I mean, you look at copper, aluminum, any of those type of metals have really been some of the leaders on this advance. I mean, gold has certainly done well in itself. So it's, and again, I think speaks well to the economy shaping up in China as well. I mean, we've already seen their real estate sector look like it's turned around. So, for months and months, of course, we know all we talked about is how poor that's going to be, and it's dragging oil down, it's dragging all commodities down. Well, we probably over-exaggerated that, just like maybe we over-exaggerated the grain rally this week. Okay. So it.
And that's right to our next question. Isaac in Riceville, Iowa wonders, you mentioned this on the show, with the grain markets rallying this past week, is there sufficient fundamental support for these prices?
I would tend to say not at this point in time. Okay. I think it was an emotional move. We probably took a lot of shorts out of the market, that were little by little coming out, and once we pushed into the new highs, the stops were triggered, and you always tend up swinging the pendulum further than you should. Granted, the issues in Argentina with the wet weather helped accelerate that, but even there, most of the news that we've seen says, the damage is maybe not as significant as what the market would have led you to believe this week. So, not that those changes or something couldn't develop later on, but to sustain the rally right from here, or without a correction even, I think would be a little bit unlikely.
Okay. Now, as we talk South America, I mean, it's hard to ignore kind of the elephant in the room, which is Brazil, massive production and massive amounts of political unrest. They have now, one house has impeached the president, Dilma Rousseff, which I think, contrary to nearly any other time in history, has led to their currency strengthening. Well, it's a rarity.
Well, correct. And of course, there's so many things in flux there. I mean, not only have you all this political unrest, but you've got really a commodity-inspired recession going on in that country, particularly with, and yes, we know oil prices have bounced back up, but I mean, the type of drilling they do there, I don't know, $40, $45 oil really helps them. And of course, a lot of the political controversies there surround oil
Yes.
and where that money was flowing to the
Petrobras
wrong
and-
places.
yes.
So I really kind of tend to look at Brazil. I mean, not that they're going to go away by any stretch of the imagination, but they have had several years of just phenomenal profitability in the ag sector. Always a lot of incentive to continue to expand acreage. Those days are probably behind them at this point. Now, conversely, an interesting topic that was out there this week. Argentina, of course, came back into the world debt market this week, and if we would have gone back 2 years ago, and threats of default again and lawsuits going on. And I think it's a never-ending story. You think, well, who's going to loan money to Argentina? Well, they were lining up at the door. I mean, everybody wanted to loan them money.
People seeking yield, yeah.
Exactly.
And the new president, the reforms in
certainly
Argentina.
the reforms that have happened. Right, right. Yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
So did they get it all sold?
I think they had people waiting in line. They could.
Wow.
They did not. I think it was 6 or 7 billion, and they easily could have been 2 or 3 times that quantity.
Wow.
So,
Well, speaking of selling and strategies to do so, Ron in East Central Illinois from Twitter at Ron Arlo Haas is asking, what strategies are you recommending for new crop corn and bean sales after this run up in prices?
Certainly. And again, unfortunately, we've had the back off at the end of the week here. Bean prices are probably still maybe just a touch more attractive. Certainly when we in between that $9.50 and $10 range on the new crop beans, we really encourage people to take sales up to 50%. Corn, once in many respects, corn, it was a great opportunity to reward strength. Are they phenomenal levels? Maybe not so much in corn. I still think it's maybe not a bad idea to look at some type of 3-way option strategy where you're buying, say something close to a $4 put, but then shorting outside wings, a $4.50 call, $3.50 put. Give yourself a bracket, at least lays in a floor that's a little bit better than crop insurance, but then still gives you the flexibility to come back out of it if you need to as things change here in the summer months as we move ahead. So,
would you do a similar move on beans up here, or would you be straight selling futures or selling cash?
We tended to just straight futures cash, whichever the guy is most comfortable with, the guy or gal, I should say, be inclusive there, but whatever they're most comfortable with. But in each case, even on corn sales, we really suggested it's early. Yes, you want to reward April, May type rallies, but on the same token, it's not the end all. We think prices will probably have some excitement later on. Not that it has to be weather inspired, but chances are there'll be some kind of a weather inspired move. So if we do get the normal break back down into April, May, or May, I should say at this point, then we'll probably want to come back with a call strategy to really have those courage positions on to make those sales easier later.
Okay.
So.
Speaking of weather, meteorologists you follow, are they still anticipating a La Nina? And if so, when?
Actually, Drew Lerner is one of the persons or people that we rely on the heaviest out of world weather. And, he's been very consistent. In fact, 6 weeks ago probably said it really looks like the shift in El Nino was happening a little more rapidly than NOAA was, really showing on their models. They give those broad bands. And has basically stated it looks like by June we could, if it continues on the same pace, by June we could be in La Nina conditions. Now, granted, that's happening late enough in the year that it's probably not going to, call for any kind of a major disruption in production, but, there certainly could be pockets here and there, okay. Which, and again, that's really all you need. Now, granted, here again, you come back to the corn acreage. If we had planted or theoretically planted 90 million acres, something less than 165 bushel would have made a huge difference. If we are 92 or 93, boy, you almost got to be under 160 to have a major market impact. But we also recognize that, just like this week, when something happens, a little panic happens, we tend to build maybe a little better or a little bigger expectation than what really occurred. So I think
we get some July, August heat and dryness, and even if it doesn't do real crop damage, it could give you some selling opportunities.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Always appreciate your insight, Dan.
Always my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for sending in your questions via Facebook and Twitter. Please continue to do so, and we will get expert analysis right to you. Thanks for watching, and have a great week.